Okay, well, thank you to Matt Cundill of Sound Off Podcasts and Crier Media and all around podcast guru for coming on to the 905 today so that we can talk a bit about the reality of Bill C-18 and kind of get away from the intent of it and get more towards the impact of it today. Matt, thank you very much for coming on to the podcast today.
Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
And just in the issue of transparency to our listeners, we are part of Crier Media. Matt, you help Crier Media with their podcast, so that's how we know each other. And you are currently helping us work through this Bill C-18 fiasco on our end to keep us in your ears, listeners, so to speak. So on a probably not so professional level, but thank you very much, Matt, for your help on that end, on the professional side.
You're very welcome. It's going to be an interesting time to see how we can navigate this. But while it appears to be very, detrimental and it's totally an infringement on our businesses, I think we're still going to be in good shape. So I'm a bit of a therapist with this.
I mean, I hope so. And I guess let's just kind of get into it. Roland and I have been talking about this a little bit kind of off air and behind the scenes, and we view Bill C-18 as kind of a last-ditch attempt by the federal government to hold an old, outdated model of news information dissemination to the public. I kind of view it as the newspapers are a holdover of the 19th century, and we're now in 21st century with various forms of news platforms, podcast, YouTube, whatever have you. Very decentralized. And it's like this last gasp, well, let's try and keep the power to the tour stars and the post media and their failing empires. Is that kind of, am I just being over dramatic with that analysis?
No, you're exactly right. And let's not mince words here. These are the companies that went to the Liberal government and said, we need help. We need help in this. We're losing revenue. I think a company, for instance, like Bell, or, it could be Shaw, it could be Rogers. These are companies that work closely with the Canadian government to do things like, lay cable, to get the internet into far-reaching places that, the government really wants to see high-speed internet everywhere. These are companies and government that are doing business every day. And at some point, these companies went to the government and said, we're doing things for you. You need to do something for us. And you need to solve this problem of our declining revenue in advertising. It's not like nobody saw this coming. We saw this coming back when the internet started. A lot of newspapers even participated and went and got web pages. And the next thing they did after that was, well, here comes Google. Now we're going to share. Now we're going to join social media. We could see this coming, and where the advertising money was going to go, whether, it's a radio operation or a newspaper. People started to buy less and less newspapers, and, as it were. And, newspapers have tried to do subscription models, but the real key here is that it costs a lot of money to do journalism. It costs money. You guys right now, we're all sitting here talking, we're giving up our time. There are things that you do outside of this to contribute to the show. And investigative journalism, which has really been the backbone of so much of these newspapers for many years, it costs money to do that, and they don't have as much anymore. So now we're seeing journalism, it's a little bit worse. This is a solution that somehow the government has come up with, and I think they went and said, okay, well, how are we going to do this? Well, let's make these guys pay. They're taking 80% of the money, Google and Meta being Facebook, Instagram, and now Threads. They're taking your money. Let's try to get it back. And I think that, in a past age in Canada, it could have been steel, it could have been whiskey, it could have been any number of things. At one point, it was fish. But the government would put a levy on it, 2%, 3%, 10%, whatever it is. If you think about, this, we're talking about local businesses. They're the ones who have redirected their money to Facebook and Google. So why aren't we taxing them? Why aren't we making them pay 3 or 4% to fund, a journal? That would be the easy solution. It's terrible politics, because, the government doesn't want to come up with another tax, which will infringe on small businesses. Well, why do I got to pay another 3% to go and fund these people? It would really open up a discussion about how we're funding journalism. And listen, no government wants to be funding journalism. I know they're doing it. They passed out about $500 million to a bunch of operations a little over a year and a half ago. They don't want to be in the business of that. It's not healthy for democracy. Yet here we are, and we are in it. So this is the crux of the problem, as I see, the way the cash operates.
So, I mean, let's just, for the sake of our listeners, anybody who hasn't picked up on this already, here at the 905, we're one of the first companies, one of the first podcasts to sort of be caught up in this, because we went onto our Instagram page the other day and suddenly got a message saying, hey, we're not going to show your stuff to anybody in Canada anymore because you're a news organization. And there's a couple of things about that which troubled me, quite apart from the kind of whole democratic thing. Ultimately, this is an issue about people taking newspaper content and, as the newspapers would put it, giving it away for free. As other people would put it, giving free advertising to the newspaper by passing articles around and taking people to the newspapers. Now, there's all kinds of additional problems with that, I know, and that basically Facebook and Google and all those guys have basically taken all the advertising that used to go to newspapers, and now they get the advertising revenue rather than newspapers. So sure, I'm not saying there isn't a problem that needs to be solved. However, what's happening is that, not only is our stuff being blocked, which, we're no part of this argument, we just want to be left alone to do our own thing. Things that we voluntarily put onto Facebook or Twitter or Instagram of our own sort of free will is being caught up in this, which is a quite different sector of content, actually. The argument is about people taking stuff from the website and giving it away through social media kind of free of charge. Our Facebook page or our Instagram page is nothing. That's our choice. We've chosen to give things away. So there's a kind of it's a double side to this, and there's kind of a curse on both your houses, I think, in that I feel like, personally, I feel like the government has been far too willing to listen to the big media companies and kind of ignore the smaller, newer media that are innovating in the sector and who are actually managing to make money without subsidy, and sort of throw in a huge sort of hammer blow here that has all kinds of unexpected ripples that we're being caught up in. And also, a curse on the actual social media companies for being, kind of bullies here. I mean, it seems like this is a shakedown, right? This is like, okay, you've tried to do something. We're going to make you we're going to punish you for that. As I understand it, Meta and the rest of them, well, certainly Meta tried the same thing in Australia as well, and the Australian government backed down. Is that kind of whole very long and wordy analysis something like a fair picture?
Yeah, I mean, I could have shortened that description and just said that you caught shrapnel.
Yeah, absolutely.
and that's what happened here. I mean, listen, the legislation has passed, and under what is written in the law, the tech companies would have to do what they have done, regardless of whether you wanted this legislation or not. Your first call right now has to be to your MP, regardless of their political party. You've got to call them up and say, listen, we run this operation here in your area. We have a business. And
for the record, that has happened. that email has been sent, and I'm waiting to hear back on a date and time to meet with them.
Well, who did we call and who did we write?
My MP is Karina Gould.
Okay.
We've had her on the podcast before. Roel and I both know her fairly well on outside of this, so I'm looking forward to having that discussion with her and discussing that this it hurts us on a business level, and I'm not talking. I don't really want to take the journalist part of it out of it. Like, this operation is just rolling myself. There's no big team of financiers in the back room, bankrolling us. This is Roel and I trying to make this passion project into an actual sustaining business, growing our listenership and making impact in the Canadian media landscape. And this hurts us. Like, what gets me about this bill is how how like this is going to be hyperbolic, but like how anti-capitalist it is, in that the idea of capitalism is like, you do it, you get a product, you sell to the public, it does well. Somebody else comes along and presents a better product that people say, well, I want to buy that more than your product. That wins in the free market. This limits that innovation, that free, and I'm not saying that we're better than Bell or whomever, but like, I think the people's listening habits are news ingestion habits are shifting from the 19th century model of the newspaper to podcast, to YouTube, to online video, to streaming services, whatever the case may be. Their appetites are changing, and you need to allow the market to feed that beast, to allow that innovation to happen. It's going to be messy. It's going to be not a clean thing, but you got to let it happen. And I just see this bill as kind of stifling. It's like, it's not going to have the intended outcome that they want. Torstar and Post Media are not going to be like, okay, well, that's it. We're good. We got what we needed. Everything is A-okay now. So they're going to ask for something else down the road because it's not going to fix their problem.
So good news. You're a podcast.
Yes.
Podcast is distributed via RSS.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the greatest things about podcasting is the RSS feed and its delivery. There's no gatekeepers. Listen, Apple can turn you off tomorrow for something that we say on this show, and they can go, this doesn't fit. You violated the terms of service. You're gone. That would be a problem. Apple does have a big stake in podcasting, but any one of these, apps outside of it that doesn't take from the Apple API could also say, you know what? Yeah, not you. And Google could effectively, if they really felt like it, say, you're a news podcast, we're turning you off. Now that would be an implication of about maybe 2%, for your podcast.
Right.
Listen, that's not what this is about. It's not written into the legislation that way. So I love the fact that, you're still good. What is really happening here? We don't know what's going to happen, but right now Facebook is saying, we're not going to share what you put out to Canadian listeners or to Canadian viewers. Fine. Because all you're really doing on these platforms anyway is you're sending people back to the podcast. You're going to lose the ability to promote your show through Google, where you will not be searchable. You'll still be able to put the link out there and do things. You just won't be searchable. That's a bit of a pain in the ass. The next thing is on Facebook. That's also a pain in the ass. It's more of a thorn in the side, really anything. So what I tell people is to go back and think, okay, we have to market our show. How can we do it without Facebook, and how can we do it without Google? It's just a small marketing problem. It's not necessarily as bad because you've still got an RSS feed. Your show is still going to be going out there. Apple can potentially put you on, the front cover of New and Noteworthy. They could put you on, as they run your artwork by. That's the stuff that's really what you need to do. So, and I find it hilarious that most of the solutions that newspapers have come up with is to just go to these other social media sites. I mean, come on. I mean, why are you trying to make these two social media, companies pay for everything? If they were really benefiting from it, first, you wouldn't be paying money like Chorus Entertainment is doing. Well, we're going to cancel our advertising with Facebook. Why are you advertising with them anyway if they're the problem? Well, what's that about? If these companies are so valuable, you should be partnering with them. You don't go to the government to go and do your mob style dirty work to try to collect. You should be going to them and saying, we need to work together to figure out how we can benefit one another. That's where the gold is. But they haven't done that.
And it fits into a pattern, it seems to me, of how traditional media, legacy media, the newspapers have dealt with the internet as a whole since it came into existence in the 90s, and that they've got it wrong every step of the way. And rather than evolving, changing to take advantage of the opportunities, which, let's face it, millions and millions and millions of other businesses and other media entities and other organizations have done, they've constantly said, no, but we're a newspaper. We want to stay like this, and you have to fit to us. Well, that's just bad business practices, isn't it? And they spent basically about 2 decades devaluing their own content by giving it away for free and saying, well, you can pay for the crossword, but everything else we don't value. It's worth nothing. Take it. and then wonder why no one wants to pay for their stuff anymore. There were just so many poorly thought out decisions by traditional media over that time. And there's another part of the story, I mean, kind of going off on somewhat of a tangent. I mean, I saw just reading one of the articles a few minutes ago. And obviously, again, to our listeners, if you go onto the Globe and Mail or National Post or the Star, you're going to get a very different account of this entire story than you're getting from us. Sure, we both have our biases. I think certainly it's troubling how one-sided it is in the national press. Well, there was another point I was going to make, and it's just gone right out of my head. But talk some more about that kind of lack of evolution as you perceive it from traditional media over the last few decades.
Yeah, so there's a lot of really old white men back when the social media began to pop up in 2008. And I know I had a friend who was working at CBS Radio who said, "Hey, should we put the radio station up on Facebook?" And they said, no, we're going to be creating our own type of social media platform next week. I'm like, yeah, good luck with that. There was also the time CJOB here in Winnipeg, and I went to the program director and I said, "Don't you think you should be doing a Twitter account?" "Oh, no, that's just nonsense." Well, no, it's not. And so it's really, and then the sales department also makes far too many decisions. And well, we can't monetize that. You mean you haven't figured out how to monetize it? Why don't you just do it, and then we'll figure out how to get the money to come in a little bit later. And it's true. Listen, on the internet, there's just not nearly as much money to be made as there was at one point, with radio and television. I'm still not sure why the attribution of listeners, is still sort of held in a higher regard. So if we look at the way we count, I mean, I know how to count your downloads. We can do your downloads. Did they listen to the show? Yeah, likely they did. Man, the Apple, they hit Spotify. It's a progressive download. Yeah, we can we can see how far they went through the show. That's all very good data. But in radio, I mean, they're still filling out paper ballots. Well, I think I listened to this radio station at this time and this one at that time. So I'm not quite sure. A lot of it is, pressed down with ad revenue, and there are digital dimes versus, big radio and television dollars that still exist. Radio is still a very powerful medium, by the way, and audio to that matter too. With this podcast, it's still quite powerful. But I think when you try to compare the numbers against each other, you see, oh, well, we had 500 downloads. Well, we had 50,000 listeners. Did you? Not really sure. They're listening. It's passive. They were flicking by, as opposed to somebody right now is listening to this. They have physically asked for this show. They have put it on their phone. They downloaded a physical piece of audio and they are listening to it back. That is an incredibly active thing to do. And that's why, podcasting has done very, very well for itself. Now, in terms of the monetization over the years, let's talk about the New York Times. I think you referenced it a second ago, and they started a podcast. Great. It's actually the number one podcast that's out there is The Daily from the New York Times. The revenue for that is $300,000 a month. It's probably gone up since then. But if you want to buy an ad and run it for 30 days, it'll cost you about $300,000 in total advertising. To go, that's pretty good revenue. And, I've gone to a few newspapers. I said, maybe you want to do some audio, and no, we're fine. And again, I mean, what you guys do takes up a lot of time. It's hard, and it does take time, and it takes money. It takes a lot of money to make great audio. You guys got some great mics. We're all using good headphones. We're all doing things. We need somebody to edit it. We need somebody to make it sound good. We need to put it out there. We got to write some show notes. We got to put some artwork in there. We've got to do a whole lot of things to make this podcast really, really, front and center, entertaining, and a good listen and a good listening experience for everybody. But it's always been that way. It takes time to make good media. And you're right. They don't see the value in trying to, change their business.
I would say two personal anecdotes that kind of feed off what you just said, Matt. One, my first job out of university was I was the guy inputting the surveys about radio listening into the data, like into the spreadsheet. You're absolutely right. It's just people just scrolling through. I listened to CBC. Everyone wrote down CBC. It's because, and you could tell there was people who had forgotten that they had to mail back this ballot, like they'd been going on their lives. You could tell it because it was the same kind of scribbled. I listened for 3 hours in the morning. CBC, I'm like, did you really? Because like I could tell you scribbled through it. You didn't put,
you put the arrow down, right?
Right.
They would draw the arrow through.
Right.
I listened to CBC from this time to this time. They draw an arrow down to the bottom, and we know that didn't happen. And we also know that ballot was filled out on a Thursday. I don't know where this came from, but in the U.S., all the big contests happen on a Thursday because there was this notion and thought and belief that those ballots would be filled out on a Thursday around the kitchen table with X, Y, and Z in the room.
Oh yeah. And that's why I said, like, there's no way you listen to the CBC for 5 hours in the morning. Like, don't you have work? Don't you have a job to go to? Like, I understand you listen to it on the morning commute. Like, you listen to it an hour on the way in. I get that. Those are the ones that I knew people were actually taking time. But when you had like this, like that big block of the day, no, you weren't listening. And the second anecdote I have is kind of bringing back to print media. Is long before I did this, I had a small franchise operation in Oakville, and the newspapers came by and say, "Hey, do you want to buy an ad for my paper, for the paper?" Okay, well, what's that going to cost me? For a little like business card size ad on some page 7, it cost me about $2,000. I said, what am I going to get for $2,000? And that was just for one print, like one day. I said, I'm not even sure anybody, can you make sure that people are going to read this paper? Like, am I going to get to everyone to read this? And so I bought it, I put it in, nobody showed up to my restaurant. I said, that was a waste of money. And it's that model that they're still relying on, is a guy going to some mom and pop shop or some business saying, "Hey, can you buy a full page ad for $50,000?" And we'll hope that people are going to read it. I said, that's your model. That's your model in the 21st century. And I'm just like, I saw it's going to die. It's going to be dead. Nobody's going to do this. Which is why, like, when Roland and I said, "Hey, we should do a news entity," we said, "Well, how are we going to do this?" I remember when we originally did this, we thought about doing similar to like just a blog or some kind of print. We said, no, it's too costly. Nobody's going to read. Nobody reads.
The original idea was to do a magazine website. News website.
We just said nobody's going to do that.
That's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, and we said nobody's going to listen to it. It's a waste of our time and money. So we said, but what about this thing called podcast? We all listen to podcasts, and it's a bit more manageable. It's a lot more fun to do, talking with somebody and having somebody listen to that conversation about the issues of the day. And we did that, and we've been growing ever since, day by day, listener by listener. But it's just like coming back to this Bill C-18, it boggles my mind the lack of innovation behind it, of just, like you said, go into podcasting. You've got the resources. You can put together some really amazing podcasts on topics that people are curious about, that want to do it, that they want to listen. They want that information. They do. But you got to adapt. You got to change. You got to do what the people want. And just boggles my mind that this is how this is just kind of stifling that inevitable move to a new platform.
Yeah. So Pablo blew it. He's completely blown it. Before that, we also had Felony Melanie Joly, who had the heritage position. I think she did a little bit of work on C-10. Terrible, no good. Stéphane Guilbeault, we'll give him a shout out, but they had to get him out of that position real quick when he appeared on Question Period, I think with Evan Solomon. And I think misspoke and said, yeah, we're going to have to get journalism licenses, which basically meant that the 905er would have to go to apply to the government for, I'm like, okay, you people don't know what you're doing. And they still don't know what they're doing. So my advice right now to people such as yourselves and any podcaster and journalists as well, now's the time to do your newsletter. You should have been doing a newsletter to begin with anyway, only for the reason of being throttled. You could be throttled by Facebook or Google at any particular moment. Any one of these companies could disappear. But by having a newsletter, you're going to be in constant contact with your audience. And so now's the time to really build that up and to double down on on that one-on-one contact that you will have with your listener. Also, I mean, asking people to share. You can still put your content up on Facebook. You can still, share your links on Google. It's just not going to be searchable. Okay. So can we ask our listeners to promote the show? Can we ask them in some particular way, maybe, hey, post it yourself on Facebook, because they're not being throttled. The link perhaps might be, but this is where, word of mouth and telling a friend and really asking for a little bit of help in this area is good. By the way, your show has some mid-rolls in it. We may not have hit it so far on the show. That's an ad spot. What if you use that for a piece of contra? Contra being trade. That's sort of an industry radio term for swapping. So we're going to give let's say another publication in the 905 an ad spot on this show. In return, give us that silly quarter in the bottom, which is valued at $2,000. Let's do a swap. Let's tell each other, let's tell our audiences about what we're doing and our journal. These are just creative ways that we can sort of end around what has been really fairly easy. Hey, we're just going to put the link up on Facebook and we're going to push it out there. And now my homework and marketing is done. That's actually not marketing by putting it on Facebook. That's actually just promotion of your show, which is always a good thing, but it's not really, marketing. So now's the time to get a little bit away from promotion. Let's look at what we can do to market our shows. What about just going to a print person and getting, some postcards and having the QR code? And let's leave those behind at a coffee shop. Let's tell people, hey, we're having a little bit of of difficulty with Facebook and Google. Let's go to Starbucks. Can you put one of these out for everybody in the restaurant today? We're just asking for a little bit of help here, because I think this is really important that people know, you never asked for this. We did not ask for this. Pablo and Justin just went and did this on their own, completely ill-advised. And while I'm here banging on liberals, let me also take the opportunity to mention what an absolutely terrible job the conservatives have done standing up for the rest of us. Deplorable, awful. Rachel Thompson, I believe that's the heritage minister in the shadow cabinet, has retweeted a couple things which basically talks about censorship and some other nonsense. You're not speaking for content creators. Rachel Thompson should be out of a job. In a shadow cabinet position, she has not proven herself worthy of any future cabinet position. And that's why the conservatives can't get elected. Sorry. I'm an equal opportunity offender
We
right now
are
on this
we are
particular
too.
issue.
We like to there's always a standing invitation to any conservative to come on this podcast, because we got questions and they've got answers and we'd love to hear them. But
well, Rachel should be on this show, and I'm going to send her a note after this, and I'm going to ask her to please appear on this show and have some guts to come here and to really call out this piece of legislation and not just stick to your talking points. Stand up for content creators like us and get with it.
Here's a question. Do you think they get this though? Like that's what struggles in my mind with this whole Bill C-18 from all the political parties in Ottawa. Do they understand digital media, like the media landscape? Because I get this feeling all they're hearing is the Torstar and Postmedia CEOs, the Conrad Blacks and the like, going them with their 1-inch 10-inch cigar and saying, oh, we need more money. They're screwing us over with that Facebook thing, but they have no idea what actually is going on the ground here.
As little as possible. Right.
So, that's what I get. It's like they just don't get it. They do, none of them understand what's going on in Canada, at least in digital media at the current moment.
I don't think any government, conservative, liberal, or Green Party, really wants to be in the business of funding media. It's not healthy for democracy. I think we all admit that, and it's also some pretty bad. It's bad politics too. I didn't think it was great when I think $550 million was earmarked for a lot of organizations, and we have that list and we know who got what money. Mm-hmm. And it's not healthy to be doling out money. Now, the CBC aside, I think, a public broadcaster, I think, has its role. I think it's totally fine to have the CBC, but, we do have a conservative, leader who's going around, talking about defunding. And when reference, whether it's to C-11 or C-18, well, it's a censorship bill. This is not, first of all, C-18 is not a censorship bill. C-11 can very slightly be construed as one, I think, because anytime you're promoting, one podcast over another, let's say the 905er got vaulted over the Daily and was thrust at me, is, me not seeing the Daily, is that censorship? Maybe not. Who cares? I mean, I think it's really about promotion in C-11, but I don't think they really want to be in the business of this, because it does make for an unhealthy democracy. It does make for, enemies. I think the media and government have always had a strange relationship as it is. But it would be really nice right now if somebody stood up and took the lead and really pointed some direction in what we need to do. If we really do need to fund journalism, I really think there should be some responsibility put back on the people who are spending money at Facebook and Google. Maybe it's time for a levy. Maybe it's time for a 3% tax. But listen, the liberals don't want that. They're already seen as the people who boost your taxes with carbon and a bunch of other things anyway. Listen, Pierre Poilievre doesn't need any more talking points about taxes. So yeah, I would not feel comfortable doing that if I were, running the Liberal Party.
And there's a dishonesty in the way that the opposition in this case reacts to this stuff. That there's a real story here, which they could be acting as the champion of, and they're meant to be the champion of business, and they're meant to be the champion of innovative business and new businesses. Rather than do that, they take the story and they go with a completely false side of it, saying, "Oh, this is the government trying to censor us." Horseshit. It's this is not real opposition. This is playing games with politics and saying things that you think your base is going to agree with without having to think too much. And that is just maddening, because we need opposition parties and we need the actual people in government at the moment to be thinking straight and actually to be highlighting the problems with legislation, and rather than just taking everything as an opportunity just to sort of try and kneecap the other guys. It's infuriating. The whole thing is infuriating and doesn't speak particularly well to like you say, some of the people who've been behind the process towards this.
Well,
this
look
bill.
at this entire episode. This entire episode, we've basically been taking the federal Liberal government to task for badly conceived policy and legislation. It's not going to be banned. It's not going to be sent. Like, I'm not going to get a knock on the door from the RCMP saying, "Excuse me, you've been saying naughty things about Pablo Rodriguez and Justin Trudeau. Can we have a word?" This isn't about censorship. This is just about, as we said, stifling innovation and allowing, in my mind, allowing the free market to do its thing.
And I think your points, Matt, is absolutely right. I think ultimately we'll be fine if we do the right things, if we work hard, and if we think a bit harder about how we're going to get our message out, how we're going to be a bit more upfront about asking our listeners to, like, hey, do us a favor, make sure you share, make sure you tell people what we're doing, make sure you share those links whichever way you can.
Hint, loyal listener.
Yes.
Hit the follow or subscribe button right now on the podcast app. I mean,
absolutely.
I know that, but right at the beginning of your show, and by the way, like, one of the reasons that Dean and I partnered, with Crier Media, I really see that, like, dynamic audio insertion is such a big part to marketing. So people are like, "Oh, can I have ads on my show?" I go, "Yeah, we can put some ads on your show if you want, but why don't you use that space inside your show, the dynamic audio space, to really promote a newsletter?" Another thing, why not get an app? I know that sounds crazy, and who's going to build you an app? But what if you had, like, the 905er app? I know, and I'm wearing the shirt right now. For those who are, it says Libsyn. Libsyn is actually a company I do not work with. I don't have any podcasts up there, but they used to build apps for podcasts individually. I thought that was really, really cool. So if you have an app, nobody can circumvent you. The best thing about RSS is that, we put it out there and people can listen to it, and it can't really be controlled. And even if, like, everything goes sideways, you'll always have your website, and you'll always be able to put your show out, on your website. And I think also for newspapers who come to you, they should be getting a podcast. They should be calling me up, and we should be setting them up with a podcast, because right now podcast is actually the grand solution to most of the problems that print and digital properties have. Get a podcast.
Such as the 905er.
Exactly.
Get one or listen to ours, preferably the second one, but yeah.
I see we're coming up on our time here. I don't think the story is definitely not going away anytime soon. So we'll let our listeners know how this evolves and how this changes and how it affects us. And as Matt said, if you are listening this far, definitely follow, like, subscribe, share, go to our website, 905er.ca, throw us some support and sign up for our newsletter there to stay in touch with how this will unfold. Matt, Cundill, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. I know you're a busy man. It is much appreciated on this end, for not just for this episode, but for all the work that you help us with through Crier Media. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and I'm really sorry that you guys are going to be my test subjects, because I thought this would happen to somebody in our group, and it turns out that it's you. As we go through this, I'm really going to be, taking a look at your show and just seeing what are the solutions we can really do. And so, from darkness comes this light. And I do believe that this podcast is going to go up in terms of, importance and listenership, just through the revitalized marketing ideas that we're going to be talking about over the next little while.
Well, we definitely are looking forward to whatever comes down the pipeline, and I hope our listeners will be listening as well and paying attention, because I agree. I think better days are definitely ahead, and we're on the cusp of something truly great in Canada, and looking forward to being a part of it. So thanks very much, Matt. Thank you very much for listening, everyone, and we'll see you or talk to you next week. Bye-bye.